Strive and Thrive is a collection of discussions featuring guests from various fields, focused on guiding entrepreneurs in creating businesses that excel in every aspect: people, planet, and profit. Throughout the series, you can join us, Romesh and Mike, as we explore relevant topics with our guests which can help businesses thrive.
Romesh and I met while I was supporting a client transform their business, and I needed finance director support and reached out to him and his team. Since then, we've become good friends who share a passion for business and entrepreneurship. If you like today's discussion, then you want to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our latest edition of Strive and Thrive. On this episode, I'd like to welcome John Diack. John, thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, hello.
So I've known and worked with John now for nearly 3 years, John, it's been. John is a serial helper of founders. He's worked for them, he's helped them exiting their business. But I'm going to give you my little own personal experience of working with John. For me, it's been an opportunity with John to help me understand the things I should know as a founder, and those things I need to continue exploring. And I think we will find today super interesting in terms of what John's got to offer. So thank you very much for joining us, John. Could you give us a kind of painted picture of your career and how you've got to being such a experienced serial founder mentor, I think, if I was to use that word, but you might find the right descriptor.
Absolutely. So I started in telecom engineering, got a little bit of an MBA on the way. Always did lots of courses and training, and then I worked for 11 founder companies in 45 years of my career. So I was very attracted to the founder world. Spent time engineering, building radio and TV stations, then moved into engineering sales, channel management, sales management, 2 COO roles, and then 4 CEO roles. In all those cases, I was replacing founders in all those opportunities. Started mentoring in 2012, and since then, about 180 companies nationally, internationally, via accelerators and roundtables. Boards, I've been on 7 boards, all founder-based boards, and now I mentor and volunteer, and I'm writing a book called The Amplified Founder, because I just really get founders and I really appreciate what they do and who they are.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for joining us today. It's lovely to see you.
Yes, good to see you.
Brilliant. So you've got a wealth of experience, which we're really eager to tap into. Can you tell me what you love about the world of growing businesses and specifically founders?
Well, Romesh, the joke that I have is that without founders, we would be doing this with a tin can and strings. So I have a deep respect for the innovation, the radical innovation that comes from the radical risk that founders are willing to take. And the idea of having a founder having this thought that I can solve that, something that they've either collided with in their own career or their own life or their children or their family, or some event has triggered them saying, that's not all right with me, I'm going to fix that. And then having that radical risk and radical innovation, that has always been attracted to me. But it also comes with radical chaos. And that's a part of I was attracted to help in that manner. So, yeah.
Interesting. So you've talked about replacing founders. So there's obviously an element of founders that is really exciting and appealing, and that's their ability to find new areas of opportunity, to experiment, to take risks. But there's another side that you obviously help with or look at. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So when I say replace founders, I think there's 3 pathways generally for a founder who really wants their organization to achieve its brand or purpose promise. And that is either they keep growing and keep adapting and keep raising their own self-awareness so that they can match the seasons of the company, because I really see companies in seasons. And so as the company grows into the next season, is the founder able to kind of grow and morph that way? And the ones that aren't, I replace. It's not hostile. It's the natural next step. Sometimes it's the board or investors that ask that I come in, and I always have two rules. When I come in, I make sure that the founder stays until the founder and I agree that the organization is better run directly with me, or they never leave. And so I use the word replacement only in the title of CEO, because I still need their innovation and I still need their incredible domain knowledge that I'll never have. I'll never have that. But what I can do is build an organization and structure it and hire and do raises and all those pieces on their behalf. So that's probably a better way of describing the word replace.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah. And we had a chat recently where you gave some really interesting examples of high profile founders that have been known to be difficult, and why you need structure around that kind of individual to help a business or company thrive. Can you tell us more?
Yes, I remember that conversation. I think it's kind of anchored in the Steve Jobs story of incredible insight in the marketplace. And the one organization in Vancouver was at one point the second most valuable company in Canada, and I was actually brought in by friends of the founder who said, "You're the only guy that can put up with this guy. He's brilliant. Mensa 160, really high on the intelligence scale, but he threw chairs and beat up product managers verbally." And so when I came in, the first thing we would do just to really support each other was we'd have dinner every Wednesday, and that was our plug-in day each week to resync and load the business. And then I replaced the staff, about a third of the staff initially, with high resilient people who loved him, respected what he did, and didn't care if he threw chairs. And so that was a specific approach I took, kind of based on what Jobs was like at Apple. And the organization thrived. And then at one point, we split the organization into two so he could thrive in what he thrived in, and I could take the stuff that he really wasn't interested in or wasn't very good at. We did that for a number of years. And I look back and think what really worked was he trusted me to amplify him, and he trusted me to remove the stuff he wasn't good at. And not every founder is there yet. And that's an important moment when they can get to that kind of self-awareness, which he got to eventually. Yeah. So.
Yeah. No, incredible. And your accumulative experience in dealing with and providing structure to these kind of individuals who are essentially outliers, aren't they? These are quite remarkable people. You've developed a theory, or you're in the middle of writing a book, if I remember correctly. Is it the amplified founders theory?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, as we talked about a couple of times in the work that you do with Strive and Thrive, is that the concept of self-awareness doesn't get as much attention as the tools that they use to build their business. The tools are good and important, but the concept of tens and twos and in the math, I call it the founder math. After being with so many founders for so many years, it became obvious there's something that they do that I don't do as a hired gun executive, and there's something that that founders bring to the table every day that I don't, which is that risk profile and that innovation and the ability to really think outside the box isn't even a good enough term, but the chaos that goes with what they do is often because they haven't set themselves up in an environment where they can thrive more often than not. Well, the founders that we've talked about, they often spend time doing what they despise or what they're not good at. And when someone comes in and says, no, let's find someone else to do that, because your expertise is actually here. Let's get you spending more time there. And their attitude comes up and their energy comes up, and the staff around them, if they have a small team, appreciate it more. And so that's the focus that I developed, what I call the founder math, is let's get the environment they're in let's sort that out and make them more self-aware of the environment. And less, the tools are fine, but less on the tools and more on who are you as the founder and what do you thrive at. And I just see such beautiful results that I just really leaned in on it over the years. And
that is absolutely fascinating. So you referred to tens and twos. So can you give specific examples of what that means in practice?
Well, Mike and I worked with an organization, an international organization, with an individual that was probably in the market space he was in, probably an outlier and rare, but he spent a lot of time in his twos. And so tens and twos is the concept that a founder at their best can be 15 out of 10. The best you can get out of me as a hired gun is an 8.5. But the worst you can get out of me as a hired gun is a 4. But the worst you can get out of a founder is a negative number. They can be destructive when they do stuff they shouldn't do, and they're bad at, like finance or sometimes like HR or some culture stuff. Depends on the founder. But if they're in their 15s, they're producing magic, technology or service development or market positioning or thinking or language. That's brilliant. And I can't do that. I know that. So the tens and twos was the realization that if we could just get the founder to know their tens and twos and be self-aware of that, most actually aren't, which you would think would be a surprise. But when I do the tens and twos process on them, and I do it with their teams, because their teams know exactly what they're amazing at, and their teams know exactly what they're not amazing at. And they can't wait for them to stop doing the not amazing stuff so they can do the amazing stuff. But the organizations they're not set up for that conversation very often. And so when you do the tens and twos, and Mike, we did it with that individual, right? And what was so amazing was when I did it at a board meeting, finally, because I kind of had enough of banging my head against his head, I watched him change in the meeting room when he realized that not only if he was to focus on his tens, but he had a person beside him who would naturally amplify him if he was to do that. In other words, if you get your team around you to know your tens, know what you're really master at, and help you stay there, which they want you to do anyway, because they really don't want you to do the other stuff, the organization thrives. It's incredible. And so I just started to notice that over and over again. And then I had founders say to me, would you write this down? Like, I want something I can have right here beside me, like a Lencioni book, right? I want that kind of a book sitting beside me. And then I can refer to it because this is new and I want it to stick. So that was the concept of tens and twos.
Amazing. So you're ultimately honing in on what the founders are good at, given that they're outliers and where they're special, and you get them to focus on those areas, and you simultaneously find the right support structures, whether they're processes or people, tools, to kind of create an environment which enables them to perform better and be more effective and be more aligned to the business objectives. Is that a good way to summarize?
I know the two of you see the same thing, right? I'm not talking about anything that you don't see. And I'm just putting words to it that they get. I call it language that they get, because a lot of the book language that you see, good to great doesn't go there because that's not what it was designed to go there for. But this is kind of a good to great math for founders because they think differently. And you've both seen that. We've talked about it, that when a founder really finds their spot, the organization clears gravity. It's incredible to watch, right? But if they don't get focused on theirs, then they either get tired or cranky or bitter or frustrated, or their investors get crazy with them because they're not hitting their marks. So I'm not saying anything that the two of you haven't seen. I'm just putting words around it that I found works, which is the tens. It really rings their bell. It's quite hilarious when they go, so you're saying this? That makes complete sense to me. How do I do that? I said, well, let's get you to hire some people, or at least have the people around you know that that's what they should be doing, because they don't know that. They don't even know they should be helping you with your 10.
And I guess the other thing that I've found interesting, John, when I've taken your tens and twos approach to other organizations, is the fact that actually the context of the organization evolves as well. And there's points in time where the tens and twos may be different and a different need. There's a very different phase of organizations. There's the early founder when you're wrestling for sales and driving the business. And then there's the later stage when you're scaling. You know, if you're to look at sort of a different spectrum, and the tens and twos get more and more amplified as the organization changes and evolves, and it's thinking within that context, right?
Right. Yeah. Well said. And back to my comment earlier about them growing, I think the tens and twos process should be done every 2 years, because I think that's kind of the seasonal rotation of a founder-based organization. Generally, obviously, it might be shorter at the beginning. But when I do it, when I replace one of the organization CEOs, I kind of did a tens and twos process. I didn't have the language for this quite right. This was about 10 years ago, right? But when I look back, it's exactly what I did. Is I said to him, look, this is what you should be doing. And the organization no longer needs that. It needs this, which is what I'm going to bring. And I'm going to bring in people to do it for you, like a VP of sales and a VP of product management. But what you need to focus on is the way in which the next season of the market basically vision, because the market's moving, right? So moved that person into that role through that process, but didn't have the language quite right.
And do you see the tens and twos of an individual evolving over time as well? And it depends, I guess, on the individual's empathetic view and ability to adapt.
Yeah, especially that last one, Mike, the ability to adapt. They have to want it. Yeah. They have to want it. And a founder that wants it, there's a humility piece that generally is, as we talked about earlier, humility is not as respected as it could be in the founder sport. Even accelerators, and I was on 2 big accelerators, I would always pick the person when I was doing the kind of Dragon's Den review of what they were up to. And my members, the other facilitators, would pick their product or their market. I don't care about their product or their market. I care about, is this individual coachable, mentorable, and willing to grow? And all my people out-succeeded all of theirs by a long shot, only because I picked the person, not the product and the company. So yes, it is the person. But I think every founder that becomes aware of this in this kind of a conversation gets to consider the price they'll pay if they don't. And I think that's how I do it. Because, you see me, I'm pretty frank with some of these folks, right? And some of them don't get it. Then I'll say, then you're not ready for this conversation. And some of them will say to me, how do I do this? Good. That's a great starting point, right? That moment of micro humility.
That really resonates. I mean, we've discussed on Strive and Thrive the fact that it's a great trait for a founder or entrepreneur to have an open view and understand that whilst they're excellent at certain things, they're not so good at others, and that there should be a path of continuous learning for them, and also to seek the support of other people. So I definitely believe that, and I've seen that with businesses that we help, and Mike, I'm sure that you feel the same, right?
Yeah, for me, I didn't really understand it for a while, but I saw lots of organizations that had great founders, built technically strong products, and suddenly they'd become the CTO and they'd bring in someone as the CEO. And it took me a while until I was a proper founder myself to really understand that logic. I was like, come on, they've worked really hard. Why would they step to the side? But it's actually now I'm in it myself, and I'm having these Strive and Thrive conversations, and the conversations you and I have had, John, I start to really realise it. You realise those people have worked really hard, they've found out they've set up a good business, and they want to carry on being creative or building the technical solutions, innovating, but they don't really love the running of the business anymore. And you suddenly realise that there's a natural aptitude versus where you are in your life and what you as an individual want to do. And it's actually okay to step sideways, find a different role in the company, and let someone else be that person who's taking it forward.
Well said. Here's one of the tests. And so I mentored a company that did cognitive behavioral therapy online. First time it was ever done, prior to the mental health awareness cycle we're now in. And he's a PhD. And at one point I said to him, the company's now in its third phase. It's in its second round. You need to do these three things as a CEO. He said, I don't do that. I said, you need to do these three things as a CEO. He said, not interested. Said, you need to decide what you're going to do, who's to be the CEO. And he stepped aside and became chief science officer, right? And it was only me holding in front of him the requirements for the next season. His investors were frustrated. The truth was the organization was flatlining in revenue and in market growth. And so he stepped aside and we put in a new CEO. And the guy that came in was structure and role clarity and all the things that this founder would not do. So people's roles weren't very clear, and he hired some great people, but they weren't. And so the new CEO came in and within like 6 months tuned it up, and just the relief on the face of the new chief science officer, Andrew, just when I look back at him, I think that took a lot of more courage than he knew. And we all saw it, for him to say, here's the keys to my Ferrari, right? Don't crash it. But I'm going to crash it if I stay in the driver's seat, right? So I've seen a few of those. I've done at least 4 founder transitions where I didn't come in, where someone else did, because exactly, Mike, the company had come to its next season, and it didn't fit the CEO or founder's skill set. But it takes some work to get them to realize that, because one of the jokes I have is, as a founder, you will have 12 hats. And you need to get to 8, then 6, then 4, and you may never get below 3. But for the organization to really clear gravity, you might have to get to 2 or 1. And that's scary for founders, right? Who are used to doing many things, right? So
it's a huge leap of faith and does really rely on that self-awareness, which I guess you're clarifying for them. Can I ask you then? So this is great stuff, and you've used lots of examples. These are growing businesses. If you were to pare that down to a business which, I don't know, might have 10 employees, say, a startup in its truest sense, how can that process be employed?
Well, let's go down to 3 or 2, right? Let's go there, because I think it comes into play around 2 or 3, right? And so, when the founder first starts to get their first team players, right, whoever that is, their ability to manage is generally whatever it is. Some of them are really good, and some of them not so much. But where it really starts to become critical is when the organization has a lot more moving parts that take the founder away from their passion, right? Let's say their passion is product, or their passion is market, or their passion is, and now they're in administration, and now they're in keeping finance, and now that's when I see trouble starting. So it doesn't have to even be 10. It can be 3 when the organization gets its first small investment, and the investors are demanding board reports, and the investors are saying, hey, let's get together every month and get updates, and the founder's just shoot me. This is the worst thing in my nightmare. Yeah. I'm not even good at it, but it's draining their battery. And so that's when the 10s and 2s becomes important. Do the 10s and 2s. And what ends up happening is the staff go, oh, got it. If Mike's the founder, then there's no question that Mike doesn't love doing this. So let's get Mike out of this and get Mike into this part where we can see he really shines. And that's the first time I see it being potent. And then as the organization adds every 1 or 2 more people, the 10s and 2s process keeps the founder from being literally dragged into a place they do not want to go. But they don't know they have the option not to. That's generally what I encourage them, is you don't have to be here. Let's figure it out. How do you... Yeah.
I love your use of the word battery, and I often talk about that when we're working with companies. It's like, where's your battery life when you're a founder, or even when you're an MD who's working for a founder, or you're one of the team who are working for a founder? What's your battery life like? And I do think that's an important analogy, because I think it's one of those areas where you suddenly realize the team or the founder are stuck. And they're doing things because they have to, not because they're driven towards doing it. And I think there's something we've talked to a few people about the need to as a founder or as a business, it's about action. It's not about digesting it and waiting and things. It's action, and you do action if you've got the energy for action, and that's driven by your motivation. And I think that's a little circle or cycle that people don't often think about enough, I think.
Well, you'll get a kick out of this. I actually took the term CEO and changed it from chief executive officer. In the founder world, those three words don't apply. It's clarity, energy, and objectivity. If you can get those three into a founder's world, and it's interesting, Mike, I've seen organizations go down because the founder's battery is going down. They're tied tight. So if the battery's being drained because they're doing stuff they're not good at or they're not interested, the organization starts to decline, and it's an energy crisis. It's incredible to watch.
It's fascinating hearing you both talk about that, because I realize I'm kind of doing what you're describing, John, and also what you've touched on, Mike, but kind of not referring to it as tens and twos. Right? You know, kind of one of the messages I give to business owners or business leadership is you're doing things that you shouldn't be doing, that, you know, is low value to you, and your value to the business is actually much, much higher when it's spent in other areas. You know, as a fractional finance director, which is what I and my other consultants do, we can take that pain away from you. We can get you to focus on stuff that you're good at, that you're passionate about, and aren't distractions, you know, because there is you know, time is our greatest restriction. So ease your mind, and that's messaging that I really try and deliver when I speak to businesses that we support. So it's really interesting seeing it from a different lens, I suppose.
You're so generous in your language. I'm not generous in some of my founder conversations. I will say to them at some point, you need to hear me. This isn't going to work out for you. And I say that with 180 sample rates really high. And because some founders, which is part of the gift of being a founder, have to be thick-headed and driven, and I support it fully. But at some point that high resilience, high push, high drive becomes an actual risk to the organization. And so they pick the tens and twos language because it kind of burrows its way through that. And even the fellow that Mike and I work with was a pretty strong-headed guy, right? And for him to hear and to see his face in that one meeting when he realized that this was what this woman does every day, she just is his main number two. And if she could do more of that, and he would let her do more of that, it would change his life and charge his battery and all these things. But it was a pretty hard conversation. So sometimes it has to go there. And I don't think investors know that. Part of what the book is for the investor community to go, you want these founders to thrive, you need to know what their master is at, not what you can push them to do. And I think that's just a different concept. So, yeah.
And do you think you have to? We talked about humble, but we've also talked about your comment there, John, and you mentioned this a few times to me before about the need to actually have the really difficult conversations. Based on your experience, is it a mix of two, a mix of different personalities, and sometimes you've got to be more blunt, or do you think actually the nature of a founder who is often quite possessive of their own baby, that actually you do have to be quite interventional at times in the role of trying to sort of help them understand their tens and twos and what next for them and their organization?
Yeah, really well said. I think it's both, but I do think whoever's engaging with the founder, whether it's investors or friends or family or customers or whatever, has to be able to say, this needs to change. What do we have to do to get you comfortable with the fact that this path isn't going to give you what you want? The language I say is to clear gravity. It takes a lot of conditions to come together. And one of them is you need to keep growing, and you need to be more self-aware. And I think self-awareness is the language I use. And if you can get people around you trust, who can have the self-aware conversation with you and just give you a sense of there's more than just the tools and pushing hard. There's another new layer to this. But I do sometimes I've had to stand in front of the train and get run over to get the message across, right? I prefer not to, but yeah.
And do you think it takes some existential threat for some of these interventions to work? You made the point about the chief scientific officer who realised there was lots he had to do, otherwise, his business was declining, and that enabled your intervention to work. Do you think it often gets triggered by existential threats?
Well, I hope. Yeah, yes, but the number of companies that fail because of that threat and not being willing to be moved as the founder is high. We see the death rate. We all know that. That's the amazing part of founders. They go into a high risk sport. But what I'm trying to do, and I know you're both doing the same thing. That's what's so great about this alignment, is we're trying to get the message across before they get to the cliff. Right, because once you get to the cliff, the ability to save it can be really low, right? But if you can get to it earlier, if you can have the conversation saying, "Look, this is not what you're good at. This is not what you love doing. So let's get you to stop doing that and get you to do the stuff that you love, your team loves, your investor loves, your customers love." That usually helps to at least start to soften the hard shell that it takes to be a founder. Doesn't always work. I've been around a lot of failures. So.
How do you deal with co-founders as a dynamic?
Oh my. So I actually use the co-founder role. I'm mentoring a company that does this amazing eye technology, and it's a really strong PhD founder with a really gentle co-founder, but so I get their roles clear. That's the first thing I do is have them see, because sometimes there's generally a dominant founder in the package, right? There's one's more dominant than the other, and I really make sure that they understand that without each other, this isn't a thing, right? That's one. And then two, in the tens and twos process, the co-founders start to figure out what they really are magical with each other about. In the beginning, they didn't even see it, but now it's written down and now it's declared. And now they can really start to focus on it, because as the organization grows, they're both under strain to change and grow. But in this organization, I've actually supported her in moving into marketing, which he is not interested in, but he didn't see that she was good at marketing until he realized that's what she's always done. She's always been doing a gentle version of marketing, measuring the market-facing piece and brand. And so now that it's written down, the two of them look way happier than they were when I got there. They were running out of each other. They were kind of like biting at each other. And so that's an example. I take the co-founder situation very seriously. The failure rate is high, as we know. So
John, you're working with delivering strong messages to very strong-willed people, generally speaking. And as you've alluded to yourself, that it's not always successful, right? It can't be. And because it's a very difficult thing to do. And also it depends on when you're speaking to them. I mean, there must be a real emotional element as well. And, how do you manage these situations?
So I actually did some training in a course called Conversational Intelligence, so I could learn how to ramp up the trust level fast, because they have to trust that what I'm saying to them, because often I'm brought in I'm always referred. I never go in cold. And when I go in, I'm referred by someone who will say, "This guy took me somewhere I couldn't or wouldn't go. I think you should listen to him because I think you're there too." So founders are really good at seeing other founders' issues. They aren't so good at seeing their own. And that's good. That's why accelerators and all the different labs are excellent, because one founder can sit beside another founder at the table and go, "That's not going to work." And the other founder's like, "Really? Say more." Because they're both founders, right? But when I come in through a referral, and I go in through, I always start with a soft, high trust process, knowing that at some point I'll probably have to get to strong language, but I don't just go straight at it. I wouldn't want to hear myself do that anyway. But it's high trust, and I think not a lot of founders have high trust people around them, because they generally They don't want to work for anybody, which I get. They want to be self-employed, which I get. But they do need to find mentors around them. Mentors are really important for founders. And so that's the other thing I do is I send founders into mentors to give them insight, like you do. Give them insight and guidance from people who have done it. And that helps.
I can see Mike is champing a bit to ask you a follow-on question, but I just want to nip in with a final ask of you on this particular area. And I'm fascinated by that concept, that conversational intelligence and building high trust quickly. How do you do that? What's the secret there?
Well, the science of conversational intelligence is a science about the brain, and it talks about how we have the fight or flight, but you can actually talk somebody. The new science, the new brain mapping, you can talk somebody off of a fight or flight moment. And founders are in fight or flight a lot in their early days. You have to, and I support it. I get it, right? But I've engaged with this new technology, I call it, because I had to have a tool set, especially on Zoom and on video, where if someone is in a fight or flight mode, can I use what's called language of mutuality? Can I find common ground fast to get them to a place where they are open? And it works brilliantly. It's worth reading the book. But the point is that I needed a tool because I was on video, so I'm not even sitting at a table with them anymore, given how we do this. I needed a tool to be able to back them down willingly from their fight or flight moment, which they were in, because of fear or just a desire to push harder, or they were just trying to control all the things that founders have to do. I love what they do. They have to. That's how you get an organization going. But at some point, you need to hear from somebody else. And so I had to find a tool set to do that. So.
And what is the name of the book, if I may ask? I'm quite interested in.
Yeah, it's called Conversational Intelligence.
Brilliant.
And it's a book that anyone can read. And what it does is it gives you a way of which you can work with a locked-in brain position, which we all get into. We get to it in life all day long, right? So that was the tool I needed during COVID, post-COVID, when video was the only play and I was no longer sitting in front of humans. I had to find a tool because run video, right? So
I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, John, and it's my question I wrote before this is now even more different. So let's see how it evolves based on what we've just been talking about. I know you and I have talked about sales, and we've talked about numbers, knowing your numbers, and we talk about building the right operating model and product design methodologies. And you've also talked about incubators and how they train a lot in lean startup and methodologies. But actually, we've spent 40 minutes talking about behavior and motivation. What do you believe sort of these schemes that are mentoring entrepreneurs or even training for graduates who are trying to build businesses and at universities, do you think there's a different kind of lens in the sort of approach we take to training people in entrepreneurship and business founding?
I do, I'm aware. I spent 5 years in the biggest accelerator in Canada, and what I realized is that we spent so much time on the how, we spent very little time on the who and the why, and founders do it all for why. They're why people, right? They clear the 5 why schedule really well, and so what I noticed is that we spent a lot of time talking about. And I love the various books. I'm looking at all the books on my shelf on business model and all those. I love them. Great. But who's running the business, and are they well? Are they at their best? Are they at their most peaceful, their most generative, their most creative state? Well, at the very beginning they might be, but that might get worn down as the business grows. And so, no, I don't believe that gets spent enough time on. I think that we don't spend enough time on that the person's self-awareness level falls behind the scale, and if that can keep developing, am I going where you want me to go, Mike? Because
you can see my question was sort of dancing in a few areas, but my thinking is that there's a significant failure rate in businesses, and it probably too high, and it's a disincentive, I think, for people to take the risk. Great. And I think, is there a way of helping that? And I think, you can help people with the methodologies which give them the skills, but actually the ability to have some resilience and personal development as part of it probably is the nugget. Because I know well enough, I've experienced it myself, product market fit, you probably won't land first time. It's what you do with that, and it's how you can navigate your own personal journey, I think, is something that I don't feel we train enough. We try and prepare people for risk and failure, but not what that means for you as an individual.
Great. So that's really helpful. When I developed the 10s and 2s, I realized that the founders that were succeeding were in their 15s more than the ones that weren't. And it was digital. It was digital. It wasn't like some kind of, soft, analog difference, gray area. No, the ones that thrive and punch through and clear gravity, they're in their 10s and 15s. They're accelerating. The company's accelerating because they're excelling. And the ones that are struggling, their founders are often in areas they're not great at. They don't even like it. They don't even enjoy it. And so my work, and I look back at my time in the accelerator, I was naturally doing this process with them. I just didn't have the language. And I work with this one woman, Linda, who's doing this medical curation technology, and she would continually go towards product development. She's not an engineer; she's a marketing guru. I'd say to her, "Whoa! No! Those are your weak spots." And she's like, "Weak spots? I don't have a weak spot." So that I need another language. So that's where the 2s came from. You're in your 2s. Let's get you a CTO, and we did, and that was the key hire, which is another big thing, key hire. She got a key hire, and all of a sudden she's in her 15s, and off she goes, and this person is pulling away from her the stuff that she thinks she should be doing, but she's not good at. And that, to me, is where accelerators and mentoring doesn't focus. If you can keep the founder in their place of excelling, they have more joy, more power, more effectiveness, more energy. People are attracted to them. When they're not, none of those things are true, right? So that was the distinction that I think gets missed with all the focus on tools and things. Important, yes. But if the person's not excelling, and they're the founder, they're the heartbeat. They're the literally heartbeat of the organization. And they're not excelling, the heart's in trouble. That's not a great thing.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know if I'm riffing onto the right next term, but what's your view on AI playing into this space? Because now you could have a founder who can get all the help in the world from agents and chatbots and ChatGPT. Do you think that could be an amplifier in the short term, but also an even bigger risk because they're starting to think these tools can do all the bits I don't like for me, and I'm navigating through my 15s?
Really well said. I actually think this is having agents that you've set up to know. So you have to tell the agent where you're really good and where you really suck, and you have to you have to train your tool set around you, your AI tool set, to know what you really want and what you really need. That's going to take some real discipline. I'm already seeing founders putting on more hats because AI lets them do that in an unhealthy way. Absolutely. But the founders that are saying, I'm using this tool set in the area where my team and I know that's really, I'm a master and this is my thing and they want me to do that. When actually in other organizations, the founders being told, no, don't use AI to do that because you're actually not very good at it. In fact, you suck at it. So stop it. But it does enable you to go higher and stay higher. It also allows you to be more distracted and to do things you shouldn't do. So I think your summary is spot on.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, what's your view, Romesh, on all the companies? Because you work with a lot of companies. Do you see the same trends?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the word, I think, John, that you used there, which really resonates with it, distraction. It's if it's accretive to what the founder is good at, go for it, and make sure they're utilizing the tools in the right way. But we've talked about AI on a couple of episodes, and there are so many different ways you can go. And if it's not your bag, if it's not the way, if it's not really giving you a pathway which is clear and supporting you in your strengths, then it's not going to help you, right? So I think you need to have a clear vision at the beginning as to what you're using it for. And I've used AI as an example there, but my takeaway from this entire conversation, I think, can be just summed up in one sentence, probably, and that is focus on what you're good at. If that's my underlined, triple underlined takeaway, and if you keep going back to that in whatever activity you're doing, you kind of go back to where you need to be. And I can see, John, that you're very effective at kind of communicating that and spotting that.
Absolutely. Romesh, I'm going to add 2 words to that. Know what you're good at and focus on what you're good at. Yes, know it first. That's, I love the focus part.
Right.
Yeah. Do the work. Get a shovel, dig out the roots, figure out what you're good at. Do the work to figure out what you're good at. Have the people around you know what you're good at. When your team knows what you're good at and you all agree, it's a whole different company. It's a whole different company. And then focus on that. It's to me, the knowing part is what we've really been hammering on this whole conversation, which is amazing, right? So.
And I'm going to add another dimension to what you've said, Romesh. It's probably not going to help, and you two will argue with me. But is understanding the context of where you are and where your business is.
Yes.
Because I'm quite heavy on the battery life of people, and sometimes it's just the wrong time for you to scale your business because you've got a small family or whatever it is. It's understanding and being mature enough to understand the context of your business at that point in time with where you are, and are you ready for the next step? Are you not ready now? What does that mean for you? What does that mean for your business? And I think some of what we're talking about here is splitting yourself from the business psychologically, because a lot of founders are inherently intertwined the two, and I think it's being able to split them out and recognize they're 2 different creatures at some point in time, and you've got to manage that within that world. Does that make sense, or am I taking it too far?
No, and I think what it all points to is your ability to step back is generally supported best by having people around you, mentors or friends who can say to you what you just said, Mike. Because I do agree that if you don't know where you are, what's that old saying? If you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going. And so I do believe it's having people around you. And that takes, a lot of founders are single pole batteries, right? They just want to go on their own. And the ones who have people around them, I think, is a game changer. And the 10s and 2s requires having people around you. It's hard to do it yourself. It really is.
And you need to have the resilience to actually take that challenge as well, right? Because having the right people is a great step, but you need to be able to take what they're saying and accept it when it's good advice, right? And that isn't easy. There's a real ego issue there, isn't there?
As I said at the onslaught of this conversation, I have such respect for what founders do. I also, as we have agreed, I'm tired of the failure rate. Tired of it. We got to find another path. We can't, and investors are tired of it, and customers are tired of it. Everybody's tired of it. So let's get at it here. So
and a lot of the cases, I'm not saying a lot of the cases, I'm saying a large proportion of what I see, it's nothing to do with value proposition or there's a lack of market. It's something more inherent with the landscape of the business that actually, and the person in the middle of it, I think is what we're really talking about here. And it's how do you help the person and the team in the middle of it navigate what is a complex environment.
So I mentioned to you that I did a presentation last week to a group, and the 32 founders in the room. And I said, none of what I'm going to say to you is what you expect, because it's where all 3 of us are right now, right? They're expecting me to do the tool sets and to do all the things and the product market fit, which is all really important. And I said, none of what I say will be what you expect, but I think it's more important than all of it. And it includes all of it. It rolls up all of it. And there was, at the end, I had this lineup of people, as I usually do, asking questions. And one of the individuals said to me, I needed to hear this. Like, I needed this right now because I've heard all the other stuff, which is really valuable. I needed someone to say to me, you need to get some people speaking into your head. And it was really really bright young individual. But probably it hit that moment, Mike, where he was... wasn't moving the way he wanted it to move. He was doing all the right things, and that he was in the way. And I think that was a really cool moment for him to. So I'm going to support him in calls. I said, I'll give you some time. Let's have some calls. Let's get into it, right? So,
John, what can governments do, or bigger organisations do, to foster better support for founders?
First of all, I mean, in some countries around the world, North America is not great here, Romesh. Where governments they find the risk profile to be scary, right? They need to know without the risk profile, their economies don't grow, innovation dies. So they got to bring founders inside their government structures and let the founders speak to the founders, right? Because if you're a bureaucrat, I get it. Founders scare you to death, right? Because they're completely opposite to what you are. So that's the first thing is learn to embrace them. There's some countries, especially in the Middle East, where the founder programs are off the scale effective because government has said, go. We'll give you great internet. We'll give you low cost places to work. Go. We'll give you what you need. And so I think the first thing is get more comfortable, if not embrace that your next season of companies are founder anchored. The big corporations, it's a changing sport, right? And so that's the first thing. Yeah. And then the second thing is that all the tax things are great. Keep them simple because founders don't have the time to figure it out. They just don't. Keep it simple.
Love it. That's a great sum up. Thank you.
We've talked a lot about current context and the individual's behaviour, and I think that's something that can resonate with founders who are listening to this. What do you think about sort of helping founders imagine the future? How much time do you spend helping them think about what a different future looks like for either themselves or their business? Because often they're quite visionary individuals. Right. And do you think there's a need to kind of help them contemplate alternative futures for their business and themselves that might mean they're separate or different roles? And sort of, is that part of your role doing some of that?
Yeah, Mike, the language I use is if you're going to work with me, we're going to make a key hire.
Okay.
And I call it that key hire. They scare you. They're so good. And they lift you up because a key hire is when you start to break out of the founder mode, which you have to do to thrive. And so that key hire could be in one of a bunch of different domains, but it's that piece that's going to help you figure out what is the next season for the organization. How do we, because I work for an Israeli company, and when Israeli companies don't go into markets to just get 10%, they go in to dominate. And so I was with an Israeli company where we dominated every market we went into, and we made key hire after key hire after key hire after key hire. I just watched the organization keep putting the pieces in place. That's where I go with them. We're going to find that key person that's either going to drive your market presence or drive your technological footprint in a market domain, become market experts. So I'm a big believer in the key hire concept. And it's scary. It's the scariest thing they do. Two of the slides I presented last week were the need for a key hire and why it's scary and why you want to embrace it and get good advice on how to do it. Because done well, it's a game changer for your company. Done badly, that key hire can really hurt you. And so right up your alley, Mike, is that to get to the next season, it's going to be someone else that's going to help you do that.
Really, really good. We're coming to the end now, John. So our normal approach is there's kind of a synthesis of our analysis and we sort of feedback on what we're thinking. I've written copious notes on this call to try and distill my thinking. But I think for me, we continue to be about helping the founder and help them on their journey. And I think helping them know where they are and what they can do, and really importantly, what they're a 15 at. And I've always used 10s and 2s with you, never 15s. But for me, my takeaway from this call is really think about the 15s because you're so true. If someone's great at something, get them in there and they can be absolutely game changing for a longer period of time. And I think working out how to navigate that, and that will include the key hires, is kind of my key takeaway that's slightly different from when I've thought about it with you previously. So I love to learn on these things. Romesh, any reflections on yourself?
I think it's beautifully simple message, actually. It's why it's so effective. It's hard to do, but actually, when you follow what the guidance is, and I'll tweak my prior phrase, John, based on your good correction. Know what you're good at, and then focus on that. And I think that is tremendously powerful. Repetition of that and coming back to that is the point, the anchor, I think can be tremendously effective. And it's not an easy thing to do, but wow, and you've told some amazing stories and examples of how that can transform organizations, and it's inspirational, actually.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Thank you very much for joining.
You.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us, John. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and this was
As
good as I expected. So, thank you everyone very much for listening or watching to this podcast, and we hope you enjoyed today's discussion. Strive and Thrive is a podcast for entrepreneurs, founders, and business leaders. Please like, follow, and subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Strive and Thrive.